Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Bill Whittle, your host at the Stratosphere Lounge, and coming to you live from beautiful downtown Sherman Oaks, California. Um, Everybody is talking about how they can hear the AC in my studio. We're just grateful to have AC. Uh, so anyway, good to be here. Hi everybody. Sorry about the echo. Okay, I can't tell what that echo is. Hang on, hang on. I will remove this sound. I will add some sound. How's that? Is it better or worse? I'm going to try and monitor this, which makes it even more difficult. Better, better. Aha! It's better, but it's still there. How about this? Hang on. We're using advanced technology now. How about that? Crunchy echoes. You know, there's nothing like eating carrots in a cave to improve your mood. I took one of the inputs down. How's that? All right. Terrific. We have a reputation to maintain after all. And I'm glad we got that out of the way. Now we can get on to a perfectly produced, error-free show of the kind that our audience has come to expect. Sorry about the carrots. This will be the last one. Anyway, good to be back. Very good to be back. Going to be in, where am I going to be? Westlake Village tomorrow. So that would have been 3 Thursdays in a row, and that's just way too much. So last week, and by the way, both times, both Thursdays, I just plain forgot to put a post up. I was just gone. So sorry about that. But in any event, last week was tremendous. This time last week, my beautiful wife Natasha, hello baby, we're up in Carmel at a speaking event. But when somebody says, "Hey, do you want to come speak at our club in Carmel on Valentine's Day?" My answer to that is, can I bring my wife? And the answer is yes. And so we did, and we had an absolutely incredible time. It's unbelievable. It really is. It's just shockingly beautiful up there. But I have to tell you, I think for me the best part of the trip was the way we got up there. We had gone to Pismo Beach on Amtrak on the Pacific Surfliner. And I think I mentioned that we went all the way around Vandenberg Air Force Base, and I'd never been that far out on the peninsula. It was great. However, we decided that we liked the train so much that when I was taking a look at going to Carmel, I found out that there's a station in Salinas, which is about a 25, 30-minute away by Uber. So we got ourselves a little roomette on Amtrak, and the trip from Los Angeles to Salinas is about 8 hours, 8.5 by train. We got on the train. We got, I don't know, what was it, honey, 3 hours, 4 hours into it, somewhere around there, maybe a little less. And the train stopped. It was very windy during that weekend. Big storm came through. They said there's something on the tracks. We're getting some crews out there. I was just pleased to know they had a way to know that there was something on the tracks. Anyway, they had to get these things off the tracks, and it took about an hour, at least, maybe an hour and a half. We were stopped there for an hour, and I just remember thinking this whole time, I don't care. I don't care. Not only do I not care about being delayed an hour, I'm kind of glad that we're being delayed an hour. There are going to be people listening to this who've had this experience their entire lives, and they're going to look at me like one of these newly come, converts. But I have to tell you, this traveling by train is unbelievable. And part of it may be only because I've done hundreds and hundreds of commercial flights. which is nothing but stress and this and we went to Arizona the week before, and it took us longer to go from Sherman Oaks to LAX than it did to fly from LAX to Tucson, and get to the hotel on the other end as well. So, so this train thing was just a shocking thing. So I knew we'd gone up in the seats, business class, up to Pismo, but I knew I always wanted to try one of these sleeper cars. I've never done that before either. And I thought I was renting an entire room. Turned out I was booking a roomette, which is still your own little unit, and you can close the door and the curtains, and the two seats on the bottom face each other, and there's a bunk up on the top that can come down, and then you can lay the bottom seats flat. And I'd had about 4 hours sleep the night before, so we went up, we took a ride, we're looking at all this beautiful scenery. It's like having a really cozy hotel room with a big window, and things are moving by. And then we went up and we had a lunch reservation, which I was also not expecting. But the dining car can only deal with so many people at one time, mostly on account of they're so understaffed. Went up, had a perfectly okay lunch, and then went back down. Natasha's looking out the window and doing some work, and I pulled this bunk down, and boom, gone. I slept about 3 hours on the way up, and I didn't want to get off the train. I really didn't. And neither did Natasha. And then we saw Carmel, which is just absolutely beautiful, and it's the most incredible place to spend Valentine's Day with somebody who you've been waiting for Valentine's Day for pretty much your whole life. And then the train back. And the train back was fantastic. Now, coming back, on the way up, out of Van Nuys, we left Van Nuys Station and got into Salinas. Leaving Van Nuys, I was shocked, and I'm not easily shocked by this anymore, because underneath every freeway overpass in LA now, underneath the one in Sherman Oaks, everywhere. It's not just in bad neighborhoods, everywhere. We would see these tent cities and just piles of garbage and collections of plastic jugs from homeless people. But on the way up, when we got on the rail, I just saw just entire communities of people living out of cardboard boxes and stuff. And then that was on the trip up. On the trip back, we were on the other side of the train, and we were down on the ground floor instead of the upper floor, like when we went out. And on the way back, out of Salinas, we went through homeless metropolis. We passed by what now bears repeating. Eric Blake said, just remember, Bill, if she says, "Oh, honey, don't get me anything," it's a trap. It is a trap. So I couldn't believe how many, not how many, but this homeless city went on for a mile. The entire half hour out of Salinas, there were clusters of them, but this one was just continuous for a mile or two. And I was thinking, this high-speed train that we need in order to move farmers rapidly from Modesto to Bakersfield and back is obviously just a gigantic scam. And, it's a funny thing, because obviously I'm very hesitant of subsidies and suspicions and all the rest of it. But I think a rail network is in the national interest. I know that Amtrak is not the answer really as it exists, because it's neither a corporation nor the government. It's one of those things like the U.S. Postal Service that appear to be semi-private companies that are designed to lose money. But with that said, I was talking to somebody. That's kind of weird too, and unusual, a little uncomfortable, and also kind of charming, is that since they have such limited service capabilities in the dinner car, you don't get a table to yourself, even though there are plenty of tables. They put you down, they seat somebody else down. You have to actually meet people and talk to them. I know it's shocking and horrible. We were frightened and confused, but we met some great people, and one of the people we met on one of those 4 meals, which were paid for in the cost of our little dinette, by the way. One of those people took the train everywhere, and it told me something that I didn't know, and I was pretty upset about. It turned out that that you used to be able to take Amtrak from Los Angeles, let's say, and if you wanted to go to Florida, you'd basically just take the Southern line all the way to New Orleans through to Jacksonville, somewhere around there. Then you'd switch south, and you'd go all the way down the Florida Peninsula. But this person told me that they go to visit their, I guess it's their son or their grandson in Florida every other year, and they can take the train from, now picture in your mind, little map. They can take the train from Los Angeles through Phoenix or Tucson, all the way out to New Orleans, and when they get to New Orleans, instead of just going the extra, 400 or 500 miles to Jacksonville, when they get to New Orleans, they have to go up the coast a little. The line between New Orleans and Jacksonville was destroyed during Hurricane Katrina. It was never replaced. So now this guy goes from Los Angeles to New Orleans in order to get to, let's say, Orlando. Los Angeles to New Orleans. When he gets to New Orleans, he has to make a slight detour to Chicago. And from Chicago, another small detour to something like Baltimore or something like that. And then all the way back down the coast again. It doubles the trip. It probably more than doubles the trip. It turns a 2-day train ride into a 4-day, 4.5-day, 5-day train ride. I don't know what to say about this. I don't know what it would, but when somebody tells me that that we used to have a rail line between New Orleans and Jacksonville, and now we don't, and that passengers have to go from New Orleans to Chicago to Baltimore back down to Jacksonville, and that rail line has not been replaced or repaired, that actually pisses me off quite a bit. I know they're subsidized, and I don't like the fact they're subsidized, and I also know that they're not going to make money as a business, apparently. Although I'm not sure why. It seems to me like it's just they don't know how to advertise, because anybody who's ever traveled in the modern world, I'm just speaking for myself and Natasha, but once I found that train, it's like, man, I'm taking the train everywhere. Anywhere I can go, I'm going to do it. So why wasn't it fixed? I mean, it's been, what? It's been almost 14 years? And it's just, they just didn't fix it. And I'm sure they didn't fix it because they didn't have the money. And when I hear that we don't have the money, this is the part that really pisses me off. Well, we've had to make people make a 2,000-mile detour for 15 years because we don't have the money. You don't have the money? Oh, here's somebody. I knew we'd find somebody who would know the answer. I knew it. Cash 18 says it was repaired over a decade ago, but Amtrak will not use the CSX line. This is something else I don't understand, and it's something I probably should understand, because at the very least it's interesting. Amtrak has an unusual ability and habit, which I admire, actually, of telling the passengers exactly what's going on. I've really been astonished at this. So every now and then the train will have to stop, and I have no problem with this at all. Well, folks, we have to stop here for a few moments. Got to wait for the southbound train to pass, and then when we get a green light, we'll be going ahead, and so on and so forth. But many times on the trip up and back, we'd stop, and the guy would say, I remember coming back, he said this twice. He said, we're going to stop here, ladies and gentlemen. We need to get a warrant to travel on, I don't remember for sure, but I think it was Union Pacific line. And then when we got another distance, he said, now we need another warrant to travel on this other line. And here's the thing that I didn't understand. I mean, it's obvious when you think about it, but you think about rails and you think, well, rails are like roads, like highways. You just get on them and go. No, it's not like that at all. Apparently, the different companies own different stretches of the road, and so if you're going to travel from one end to the other, You know, you have to get all these permissions. And when somebody said that Amtrak will not use the CSX line, where'd it go? My question is, if you can answer it, Cash, is why? Why don't they use it? So obviously he says the line was repaired over a decade ago, but Amtrak is still making a 2,000-mile detour. So why? Now, Eric Blake points out that the train, the reason I wanted to talk about the train just as our introduction tonight is because it's not a place to, it's not a way to get there in a hurry. It's so different than everything I'm used to that, I mean, I didn't want to get off the train. I was having a wonderful time. My wife and I were having a great time. We get tired, we'd sleep a little bit. We could actually sleep. You weren't crammed into this thing, and there was no TSA, and there was no, you have to check these bags, and none of that stuff. You just put the bags on the train and off you go. And they got a lot of room on a train, and they carry a lot of bags on a train, primarily because the train doesn't have to fly. And Sir Wibben says that Amtrak loses tons yearly. I understand that, and I don't like it. I don't know why. Let me put it this way. I suspect. Okay, so CSX wants to charge a heavy fee to use a right-of-way. So I know, obviously, we use trains for freight. Obviously, the entire country lives on trucks and trains. And ships come into Long Beach Harbor, container ships from all over the world. They pull them off of the ship with computerized cranes, which is an amazing thing in itself. Drop them onto trucks, and the trucks either take them locally, but most of the trucks go to the giant rail yard in East LA, and they put them on trains, and then they go around the country. And a great percentage of the total stuff that comes into the United States for sale, when you go down and buy a Chinese power drill at Home Depot, it almost certainly came through Long Beach and got to where you are by train. So the rail lines exist, and freight takes priority over passengers, I read. And that makes kind of sense to me, too, because we don't have that much train traffic. But all I'm saying is this. Excuse me for not trying the name. I want to say Extisht. Says both times I rode on Amtrak, they broke down. I ended up on buses anyway. We had a situation going up north where we were 7 miles away from Salinas, and the conductor stopped. And again, this brutal honesty. Folks, we're going to have to stop for a minute here. We had a hose that became disconnected, and we're working on repairing that now. And as soon as we get the hose back connected, we'll be on our way. And it was about a half an hour delay. And again, I'm comfortable, so I don't care. But here's kind of the rhetorical question. Obviously, this country does not move at the speed of trains. And for all the talk about high-speed trains and for all the talk about taking the trains and rail systems and how it works in Europe, let's be honest, Europe is the size of San Bernardino County. We have so much further to go than Europeans do, that going at 60, 70 miles an hour average, and that's, I think, probably generous, is just not feasible. You can't run a country, you can't make business trips when it takes 3 days to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, no matter what shape your rails are in. So I understand that. And I understand that freight doesn't really care if it's got to get there fast, it'll go FedEx or some other air freight, but I understand how it works. I do. My question is, since the experience is so pleasant, and it's so pleasant under these circumstances, it's a pleasant experience under the circumstances of being just grotesquely understaffed and with maintenance issues and delays and all the rest. It seems to me that if you had this in the hands of a private company that knew something about advertising, you could make a profit on this. And the profit is not going to come. I'm talking about long distance rail. I'm not going to deal with the Eastern Corridor rail transit system. I don't know whether that makes money or not, but in any event, it's that rail is actually working up there because northeastern America is about the size of Europe. The rest of the country is big. So I'm wondering if it couldn't make money if it were managed by somebody who knew how to make money. Took a trip to Lake Norland. Yeah, Greyhound's not a great experience. So high-speed rail doesn't do anything for us. It doesn't help us here. In the northeastern corridor, high-speed rail doesn't work because you've got so many stops for commuters that are in such a short distance away from each other that you never get to high speed. So high speed rail in the northeastern corridor where all of these rail lines and commuter lines are, that doesn't make any sense. And then high speed rail across the country doesn't make any sense because no one is going to be able to justify going at 180 miles an hour when they can go at 550 miles an hour. A 5-hour flight from LA to New York is really rough physically and really tedious. And when I'm on the plane, I'm just thinking, my God, it can't be possible. Another 2 hours. My God, is this flight ever going to end? Train's just the opposite. So I'm trying to understand this, and I think I get the basics. So if it seems like this analysis is correct, then high-speed rail doesn't work in the Northeast. And high-speed rail doesn't work across country because the country's too big for high-speed rail. Japan has wonderful high-speed rail system, and so does France, but you can get from one end of Japan to the other end of Japan in a reasonable amount of time at 160, 200 miles an hour. You can't do it in LA. So could a manager, if a private company were to take over Amtrak and run it as a Steve Darrow, if only we could teach trains to fly. Yeah, that would be it. If only we could teach them to fly. So yeah, and another point here, Sir Wilbin says, high-speed rail sounds progressive and green, and that's why it keeps getting pushed. And I agree. And I know that the power freaks want us on rails because rails determine where we go and when we go there. They don't like cars. I get it. And as I said earlier, but Pat just backed it up, Japan's about the size of California. So I don't see a need for high-speed rail. This is what I'm saying. Could Amtrak make money by offering what Natasha and I loved about it, which is just the plain comfort and the relaxation for a reasonable period of time. And when I say a reasonable period of time, I'm saying maybe top end 2 to 3 day trip. Because it is an incredibly great experience for anyone who's ever had to travel by air. And I'm all about the miracle of air travel. When I hear Europeans saying, why don't you have a rail system like we have in Europe, I tell them about the whole, size of Japan thing and all the rest of it. And I also say, I don't know how many airports there are in France. Maybe there's commercial airports. There might be 30. The United States has 13,000 airports, paved airports, and we must have 200-300 commercial airports, at least that. It's a big country, and we fly to get from some places to another. That's great. I get it. And when they talk about high-speed rail in California, the original iteration was going to be, if only there was some way to get from Los Angeles to San Francisco at high speed. Yeah, if only there was some way to do that. Get there at 160 miles an hour, or you could take one of the 50 or 60 flights a day that'll get you there in 550 miles an hour. But anyway, I'm just digressing as I usually do. The question is, could it work? I don't like government subsidies on anything, and I know it loses money, but does it have to? And that's the first step. And the second step is, well, I don't really want to go there. I was about to say, if there was a subsidy for something that the federal government paid, this would at least be something that would qualify. In other words, if federal dollars have to go someplace, I'd rather have them go into buffing up some kind of a passenger rail line across the United States rather than, paying for public sector employees' retirement funds and EPA regulations and all the rest of it. Anyway, for what it's worth. Mr. Subtle says, but airplanes are not owned by the government. Precisely right. So I get it. I really do. I'm not calling for putting government money into Amtrak. I am saying, however, and I am saying high-speed rail is a prestige project, as Joseph Talbot said. And by the way, when I say it's a prestige project, it's actually, I just did a Bill Whittle Now about this morning, this whole train thing. Scott asked me a question about the high-speed rail. But what I talk about in that, what I talk about in that episode is that this high-speed rail in California is not a prestige project. That's the way to think about it if you don't understand the nature of what we're dealing with out here. So when you say that the high-speed rail system in California is a prestige project, which is what I believed for years and years, what you're thinking is, oh, these politicians are doing it because they want to look good in front of the people, and they want to look good in front of their European betters at cocktail parties and stuff. But I think that's missing the mark. I think that's a rational way to look at it, or at least a somewhat rational way to look at it. But there's a much more logical reason for high-speed rail, and this is the reason why we have high-speed rail project in California. It's a two-part reason. The first part is that the high-speed rail system is a way for the politicians to make money, take money from people that make money, and give it to people who vote for them. That's why there's a high-speed rail system in California. It is simply it's a Potemkin village that is there constructed in order to allow you to put money into the system with the belief that you're going to get something that may or may not be useful, but at least sounds cool. So they pick up $20 billion or $200 billion or whatever for the high-speed rail system, and then they keep a significant portion of that for their $500,000-$600,000 a year or $200,000 a year retirement funds for the government or whatever. And then what the politicians do is they disperse the jobs for building the high-speed rail to their crony companies that are bid on by, quota systems and all the rest of it. And then on top of it, the high-speed rail companies then get their people in the union to go out there and organize and vote for these guys. So it's like management and labor working together to rip off the customer. There is nobody protecting the customer. I'm the customer. I pay California income tax. So they take my money, they send it to Sacramento. They keep a big hunk of every dollar, and then what's left of it goes out to somebody's company or companies that are friends of the politicians who say that, well, since it's a union job, now we're going to get the unions involved, and the unions get out there and they do the footwork and all the rest of the stuff necessary to reelect the people that make the decisions in the first place. And it's as Sir Wibben says, it's a way to redistribute wealth. It is absolutely a way to redistribute wealth. And frankly, if they're going to redistribute wealth like that, why even use the high-speed rail system at all? Why not just use the existing freight system and have guys like me just go down there and pitch $100 bills into one of these container things? And when you filled up a container full of $100 bills, you keep filling them up until you got a train that goes a mile or two long, ship the money to Sacramento, cut out the middleman, and then just keep it. Why don't we just save some time? And I talk about the fact that Trump's asking for some of that money back, which I think is awesome. When Donald Trump says, hey, look, the federal government paid all this money into the high-speed rail system, which you've just canceled or truncated. We want the money back. I thought, oh, this guy's awesome. Eric Blake says, just remember California. You could have had a businessman as governor, John Cox, but you chose the successor to Brown. Well, first of all, I didn't. But secondly, Eric, I was in a room with John Cox. I was a fundraiser with him. I was in the front row of a big room full of people. And I have never met a politician that I found less attractive than John Cox. He is just oily, bogus. He may be a fine businessman. I voted for him. He would have been a much better choice. But man alive, he was a miserable politician. So, anyway. That's it. So, anyway, we had a wonderful experience. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Despite the... I'd like to know more about this. If you can give it to me again, I'll write it down. Was it WSX? Was the line? So the line connecting New Orleans to Jacksonville is charging so much money for the use of the rails that Amtrak said, no thanks. I guess that's how it worked. That makes sense. But in CSX, thank you. I'm going to just look into that because I'm curious. Anyway, that's our train story. But we had a wonderful time, and they're not paying me. I am not a paid spokesman. of Amtrak under any circumstances. However, I will say that if you get a chance to a small take a small trip, I cannot recommend it highly enough. Little roomette or a little sleeper car. I'm not 47 yet, says we talking about Ted Cruz, Oily. I have to tell you, I've had a chance to sit down and talk with Ted several times, and I think Ted is just an incredibly great, sincere guy. If he comes across as oily, sometimes I've seen on TV where he looks a little bit that way, but honestly, I think he's just a tremendously sweet guy. First time I met Ted Cruz was right at the beginning of his Senate campaign, and they were already talking about a potential presidential candidate, and I said, Ted Cruz is too nice to be president. He's too sincere. So Ted has an image problem, and that is just bad management, because he genuinely is a really honest, engaging guy. And if he comes off looking different, I'm saying this from some experience. I've spent a couple hours, with Ted Cruz over the course of many years, and I just really like him. I just like him. John Galt, CSA, says, had lunch with him, brilliant, but he never talks down to anyone. That's exactly what I found. He's just a brilliant guy, had the Constitution memorized at age 13 or something, but never talks down to you, and is just a real solid, nice guy. And when I saw the campaign in 2016, I heard people saying, "Oh, he's just nasty. He's so phony. He's so this." It's like, Ted Cruz? And then I would watch some of the things that they're putting out, and just to toss this in, I am an enormous fan of Ted Cruz. I'll do anything he asks. And just before the California primary, he gave me 45. He asked me to come down to an event. I came down. He gave me 45 minutes of his time to get his opinion on things, and that was 2 days or 3 days before the California primary. For a presidential candidate, one of two remaining, to give you that kind of time is a tremendous compliment. But I remember thinking that, my God, who's running the image on this? Who's running his image? Who's doing this? I said to some of the people after Ted left, I said, listen, if you want, I wouldn't charge you for this unless you're, falling out of money. But I really like Ted Cruz, so what I would say to you is, I don't want to get involved with the campaign to teach Ted how to behave how to act on camera. I want to teach Ted how to not act on camera. That's what I want to do. I want to teach him how to not act on camera. He's much, much, much better when he's himself, and then when he gets into speech mode, and I've seen him do a lot of speeches, he gets into this mode, and this, and I say this with enormous affection and respect for him. But I'd watch Ted doing his camp. I'd be backstage with Ted, chatting with him. I thought, this guy's going to get out there and just knock it out of the park. He gets out on stage. He starts his speech, and he goes into campaign mode. And Ted, when Ted Cruz is about to deliver a joke line, you can see this thing coming from the next county. I mean, you can just see the joke coming. Here comes the windup. It's just like, oh my God. And that's because somebody has coached him, I suspect, on how to deliver these things. But in any event, he's just not well represented. And I think if people knew him, and I'm not saying I'm a close friend, but I will say it's been one of the high points of my life to be able to say in all honesty that I was standing at a urinal in Fort Lauderdale Airport and had Ted Cruz walk across the men's room to tap me on the shoulder and say hi. He'd washed his hands first, I might point out. I didn't even know he was there. So I just love the guy. I love him. And he deserves a lot better. Anyway, enough of this opening rambling. I think 45 minutes, that ought to get us covered as far as our contractual obligations for technical errors and rambling openings are concerned. So let's get to the questions now. I'm going to go look at the questions, and everybody's yapping and barking, and they're like, everybody's like little, it's like feeding 100 puppies here. However, I would like to say one thing. And that's concerning the new website. That son of a bitch, Scott, that miserable, lowlife, lazy, stealing bastard, has put so much work into this thing. And contrary to our previous attempt, where our mission was to surprise our members with something that didn't work, that they didn't know how to work, and then make things as difficult as possible for them to understand. That was the original plan back in November. Now, we decided to try a different approach based on Scott's idea. So rather than surprising people with something that doesn't work, and Bill Whittle Cruz, somebody's talked about that. Maybe we can bring that up too. Rather than going with the, hey, let's surprise them with something that doesn't work and make them as frustrated as possible strategy, which I championed enthusiastically, apparently. I have no memory of it, but anyway. Scott decided, no, I knew we needed to do something, and Scott just stepped up with it. So here's just a couple things from kind of behind the curtain about the new website. And these are little tiny things, but you may find them interesting. First of all, we decided to test the website before we went public with the website. I know that's a bizarre thought, and many of you probably should have warned you to be sitting down before we did that. But nevertheless, that's what we did. And then turned out that there were a couple things that seemed obvious and didn't work, and longtime members just got an invitation to do the first of the, yes, this is the new website, got an invitation to do the beta testing, and he just wrote in, tried to log in, didn't work, couldn't do this, broken. I said, well, all right, well, thank you. It was broken for about 15 minutes in that regard, and then we got it fixed. We spent actual money from the members of BillWhittle.com to have code written specifically to make this thing easy to use. And so when Scott inherited the project, in order to get people signed up with their credit cards and access and all the rest of this stuff, it was a 3-step process. And so Scott said that he thought it'd be possible to write some code to streamline that, but he didn't know how to do it. I said, let's go to Upwork, which is an online talent agency, hiring agency for computer services. Scott went up there, put up the bid, told him what we wanted. Ended up being a Frenchman who's done an amazing job. So we basically got, you hold on to that thought there, Sir Wibben. Yeah, hold that thought. I do not like the old site. I couldn't update my credit card information, so I've not been a member for a year now. Hold that thought. So what we did was we had some software written that basically allowed the credit card company to communicate with the website. And just so you know, we do not have access to that credit card information. We don't have it. We don't want it, and we don't have it. It's secure, and we don't have access to it. But what we did was we wrote some software that made it a 2-step process. And from that point, Scott and I talked a little bit, and then Scott said, for a little extra money to this guy, we could make this a 1-step process. I said, do it. So we did it. Now, when this new website is up, some people I think will be able to move automatically, but here's the worst case scenario, okay? Worst case scenario is you will go in, you will set up your member profile. You'll be able to bring a picture of yourself. You'll be able to write some things about yourself. This is what I'm getting at, and this is what I really love. There will be all kinds of places for you to put information about yourself. You'll be able to follow other members and see their website, their Facebook pages, and so on. Once you do that, and it communicates with the billing company, then the billing company is the gatekeeper for the membership site. And so it is a one-time thing. And when you go to your own page, your members page on the new site, you will have your name, comments, picture if you want one. Here's your membership status. Here's the credit card number. Here's all of it. It's all in one place. It's just bam, and it's done. And it's very, very, very easy. Some people are on a legacy credit card company called Authorize.net. Those annual renewals won't be renewed at Authorize, so we're going to have to move some people over manually. But we have taken this so seriously after what happened back in November that we basically, I said to Scotty, we need to have little videos, 10, 20-second videos of screen captures like, click this button, do this. If there's any doubt about anything, just do it. So so we did it, and it's working really, really well. Now, in addition to all of this, little things, I thought, hey, is there room for that banner? Because my wife took such a great picture of me and, frozen in time, let's use it. And Scott is completely honest. John, I don't know about that. Scott will know, but we will get you. We were going to get everybody over there. Nobody's going to miss a second. So I thought, is there room for a banner? I put my charming face up there like it is on the old news site. And Scott said, we can do it, but if you do it, it looks kind of like a sort of a mom and pop kind of a private site. And I said, well, I am mom and pop. And he said, yeah, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I thought, oh, I like the sound of this. So we decided not to put my face up on the banner. We don't have anything up there. It just says BW. It's BillWhittle.com, no question about it. But we are going to be doing, once we get it open, first things first, see, now that there's an adult in charge of this, things happen in the correct order, apparently, which is fascinating for me to watch. So once we get this thing open to members, then we're going to start opening it up. Scott's going to do some more commentary, and he's going to do. Some people suggested, I don't know if it was Cheryl, somebody suggested he should do Scrapple Face articles there. So yeah, I don't miss the banner either. I don't take it personally. So we're going to start doing that. I know Alfonso Rachel hasn't had a platform for a while, and I know a lot of people. I know a great guy, Matt, Captain Jacks, has done a couple of videos that commentary that were just great. I mean, just him sitting out there just doing them, they were great. So the new website is going to have a place not only for you to have a member page, but there will be a place where members can post whatever stories they want to. You want to write a story, great. If you want to link to a story, great. That'll be updated as often as you want to update it. So all of this to say that it took, well, Natasha mentioned this to me 2 years ago, but I apparently was so busy tying my shoes or something that I didn't hear it. But sometimes you don't hear things until the time comes to hear them. You're not ready to hear them. But, yeah, Bill Book. Yeah, that's actually kind of close. What we realized, what Scott realized primarily, and Natasha realized, essentially what everybody except for me realized, that's probably the best way to put it, was that the value of this is actually the community. And I can understand how disappointing that must be for those of you who are hoping that there'd be something better than this Stratosphere Lounge group, but apparently not. In all seriousness, one of our Stratosphere Lounge members and a member of the Space Game, I swore to myself I would not mention its name on this episode. A friend of ours named Merlin notified us a little over a week ago that his wife had been run over by an SUV, and his wife, I think, is 4'11", and the SUV is somewhat bigger than that. Just run over both wheels twice, boom, 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 boom. And both the video game community and the Stratosphere Lounge community and all of the community sent him enormous letters of support. People started organizing prayer circles, all of this stuff. And when I say stuff, I mean that with the highest respect. Turns out that she's actually recovering remarkably well. Remarkably well. I once said, despite the fact that we're praying for her, but there's sometimes where maybe you don't really need to be quite so flip. So it looks like she's going to be okay. She's healing. She's healing in a way that that is astonishing to the nurses. That's what we hear from Merlin. But that's the outcome. But my point is, yes, that Merlin. My point is, while we're all delighted, needless to say, that we're delighted that things are working out, and proud of ourselves, I might add, too. The point of it is that Merlin sent me a personal message saying he'd never met people like this. Yeah, our Merlin. And he's right, because I've never met people like this. And it took 10 years, I guess, for me to realize that that is essentially, from this point forward, that is what we are selling. Because we have to sell things in order to stay in business. That's the way it goes. If I don't sell something for money, then I have to get a job doing something else. So we have to sell something. And what we're selling from this point forward is not just the commentary. Although I expect we'll be doing firewalls again in the near future. But we're not selling the commentary. Scott nailed it. He said he'd done a lot of work trying to grow church memberships over the course of the years. And Scott said that you can get people into a church with a really good pastor. A good preacher will get people into the church, but people stay in the church for their friends. And I realized, like a lightning bolt, like boom. Oh, okay. Yeah, that took 10 years for that to sink in. But that's the plan. And people who are members of the Stratosphere Lounge that are watching the show live, which is always a pretty small percentage of total people that watch on YouTube, they know it. It's a small group of people, and we all have pretty much the same values. We love our country. We love freedom. We're all big on technology and all the rest of this stuff. But we're all just good people. Good people. And there aren't a whole lot of good people. There are a lot of good. See, this point is that there are a lot of good people out there. It's just very hard to find them. And so what this new website's structure is, we're the family that we get to choose. Well said, John Pershing. What this website is going to be about, and what this company is going to be about going forward, probably starting next week, is it's going to be about, I don't want to call it community because I don't like that word. And every time you hear people say you got to get into the community, or community organizers don't like that word. You can call it a fellowship maybe, or just a pack, whatever. But when you find, this is DCG 44S. Yep, when you find a friendly place with good people, you come back time after time. And it's family, exactly. So that's what we're going to be structured for. Not just what we're promoting, but it's what we're going to be structured for. The website going forward is going to be designed not just to distribute whatever messages or opinions I have. It's going to be designed to do that and then connect everybody in the community, kind of like the common sense resistance idea. And I am looking forward to seeing the kind of commentary and the kind of stories that members are going to post. I'm not sure exactly how that. Right now, it sounds like. Right now it appears to be that there's a page for member. There's like a member blog page. Any one of you that's a member can basically start your own blog there and benefit from, if not the numbers, then at least the quality of people that come there all the time. And it's the little things that Scott has put so much work and effort into. One of them is the ability to follow other members, personal message other members from member to member. Scott has set it up so that if you had a question about when a show appeared, there's now a calendar, and it was loaded automatically. There's a calendar now that'll allow you to go back at any point in the past as far as YouTube hosted videos goes. And it's a automatic plug-in, and you can go back to January 22nd of 2015, and it will show you what premiered on YouTube on that day. And you can go back and see all of that stuff. He's put together a help desk where you can actually have a ticket. If it turns out you're having a problem with something, you write the ticket, and Scott or I or other people will go and get it solved. And Cheryl has been a big part of the beta testing. She's been doing a great job just checking everything and giving us tons and tons of feedback, along with a lot of other people too. So we're very grateful for that. Very grateful. And we're really liking where it's going. We're really just about ready. We're still knocking the last of the rust off of it. But it's even though it's BillWhittle.com, it doesn't say that. It just says BW. It's going to be a place for us to be a community and hopefully grow the community, because I know for a certain fact that there's more than that there are people that watch these shows and all the other commentary. And from this point forward, meaning next week, from this point forward, we are basically going to hang tight here. Don't pass out before I finish the sentence. But from this point forward, we're essentially saying to ourselves, we are going to be producing content specifically for the members of BillWhittle.com. That's who it's for. And then we are going to do cut downs of that content and promote those, get them out wide and get people to watch them. And those will still be free. The firewalls will be full and free. But Bill Whittle Now Right Angles and stuff are going to be for members, and they will be able to see them in their entirety. We will do edited versions of those to distribute to people and see if we can get more people interested. But if they want to watch it, they've got to come to the site, and if they want to see the whole thing, got to come to the site and be members. And part of me is very reluctant to do this, but I'm also facing, the reality of reality, and that is with YouTube putting the screws on everything and Facebook, suppressing our messages so that the membership message doesn't get out there. We just have to face the reality of the situation. Scott's pointed out that it's 29 cents a day for this. And I know everybody's getting hit up, and I know there are people out there who are non-members be able to post on the site, not non-members, but any member. So basically the thrust from this point forward is we're going to do these shows and these programs for the members. And if you want to see them, you can become a member. And if that's not something you either want to do or can do, then you're certainly welcome to see the best 3 or 4 minutes of every one of these shows. And that's what we're ready to give out for free, because remembering, oh boy, Sir Wilpin, you are batting 1,000 tonight. Remembering, my God, man, that is fabulous tagline. My God, what a great promotional campaign that is absolutely amazing. Because we've lost a lot of people, and we lose probably 40, 50 people a month, and we gain about that many, and we just can't keep losing people, so we mean not to. Plus, the great thing about this, the really great thing about it for members and for me, is that by having this be essentially open source, there's plenty of reasons to go to the website on a daily basis. It's not just, we do 2 shows a day. That's not bad output for a company that has me, Shelley, Scott, and Matt doing the editing. There are some very, very big companies just down the street that have a staff of 75. And I've seen their facilities and I've met their staff. They do amazing work. It's Daily Wire. It's beautifully run. It's magnificently run. And I have nothing but the highest regard for Jeremy and Ben Shapiro and Mike Knowles and whatever that other guy's name is. They've just really done a magnificent job of it. And they were able to do a magnificent job of it because they went out and raised a significant amount of numbers, certainly 6 figures, probably 7. And they've turned it into a profit-making machine. It's an actual free enterprise, capitalist system, profitable, money-making business. And I have nothing but the highest respect for them. We don't have those kind of resources, but we don't really need them. But once, and this is still sinking in, the situation with Merlin really clarified that for me quite a bit, just how well people responded and how enthusiastically and how energetically, all of it. But we are not going to be worried as much about the reach. But we're gonna take the quality over quantity thing, because if I think I think the Bill Whittle nows and the right angles never see less than 10,000. At least they didn't before they dialed our numbers back down. They were doing 20, 25, 30, 40,000, and then they simply changed their algorithms. They told us they were going to change the algorithms, presumably to remove spam accounts and so on. But they cut our views in either in half or by 2/3. So that's where we're going, and I think at 29 cents a day, it's certainly reasonable. And really, the thing that's beginning to dawn on me is that for 29 cents a day, it's not just my website or my membership. It's yours as well. You have a chance to say all the things that are on your mind, and your chance to reach people of similar mindset, and the content is going to be increasing, and so on and so on and so on. People are talking about things like mugs and so on. I think probably, I mean, we went through a period where we bought a bunch of mugs and bought a bunch of T-shirts and sat on the shelves back there. We had to deal with all of the fulfillment issues and all the rest of that stuff. I think the answer for mugs is for us we'll just release the art, and we'll just release what it is, and if you want to go to Cafe Press or something and make T-shirts, all yours. We can figure that out. So anyway, it's really, really exciting, and by having this thing, I don't want to commit to this because there may be aspects to it that I'm unaware of, but certainly my inclination. I'll talk to the adults about this, but my inclination is, let's just make the logos and the Stratosphere Lounge things available. This guy, the man from Uncle Homunculus, he's going away. We'll keep the artwork for those of you that like it. He'll stay on the Stratosphere Lounge logo, but when you shrink that guy down to the size of a bug on a video, he just disappears. So we're going to go with that new kind of cool built BW with the orbital stuff. So my inclination, barring intervention from people with better judgment than me, is to essentially just say, here's the artwork, and if you want to put out a T-shirt design and do it through Cafe Press, where they only make as many as are ordered, then sweet. We've seen so much great artwork come in from members. We've seen so much great artwork come in from members, Stratosphere Loungers. Every now and then I get some kind of either an engraving or a woodcut or something of people who've done amazing artwork based on some of these ideas. And we're getting the same thing from the space game as well. I did all the initial graphics for that, but people are running with it, and they're coming back with patches and posters. Posters especially are just astonishingly good. I was like, wow. So we may end up, again, independent of BWDC, BillWhittle.com. I like the posters enough to say, I think what we'll do is we'll just print those and we'll distribute them to people because they're damn good. So anyway, that's that. And thank you for the remembering, because that is the kind of thing that I just love. When I hear something really catchy and memorable and stuff, it's great. And Eric Blake is just wrote, art from conservatives, high quality. We can win the culture! Triple exclamation points. Eric Blake is like a Mustang. He's like a colt in a stall full of Clydesdales, and he's always just like bucking around. It's like, I love it. I think it's great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. That is terrific. So everybody cool your jets. Let's go to the Facebook page now and immerse ourselves in the wondrousness of the wonder. All right, here we go. So we're real excited, and Scott's real excited, and we're going to be doing, going to start a Gofundme campaign. I think we'll start it probably Monday or Tuesday. Once the site is available and open, we're going to do that. And this is the final thing I'll say about this. I know a lot of people either don't want the recurring membership, they can't afford the recurring membership, they don't want their credit card out there information. I get it. So 4 times a year, starting next week, we're going to do a just essentially a GoFundMe campaign. We're going to try and raise some amount of money. I've got a rough idea what that number is. That additional cash will allow us to do things like hire Scott Ott full time. That's the primary goal, is to get that guy out of Nebraska Furniture Mart. He's worked like a slave, and he's invested enormous amounts of time into this, and I'm very grateful. I meant to say this earlier. I can't believe I didn't. I was talking about all the things that Scott had built into the site. And one of the things he's built into the site is on the Stratosphere Lounge page on the new member site. You watch Stratosphere Lounge streaming live. You watch it on our website. And I suspect that we will be taking questions there, and we will be dealing with comments there. And if we can get this thing rolling, we can do this more than once a week. I would like to grow the membership to somewhere in the neighborhood of 10,000 people. And I don't want to be thinking smaller. It might be possible to do more than that, but right now we're at about a quarter of that. And given the number of people that watch the shows pretty much every day, I think we could probably get to 10,000 people. If we got to 10,000 people, we'd be in great shape. So some of the things that we'd like to do with the GoFundMe campaign are little things, but they're important things. One of them is to take, despite the fact that I thought it was a good idea and it remains a good idea, there's the Bill Whittle Now set. But with some additional funds, what we'd like to do is take that monitor down and make that a practical set where we have Bill Whittle Now kind of on the wall, maybe backlit like the rest of this stuff is, and lit significantly better so that we can increase the quality of just the shows going out. We have, strangely enough, we're very, very limited by how we can light me, because that screen, while it's great, reflects. It's a mirror, and we have to put lights up so high and so far off angle that we don't get to really light that set the way we would like to. Certainly we don't get to light it the way my wife is capable of lighting it, because of the fact that we get so many reflections off of that screen. So making that into a practical set, let me just be crystal clear about this, copying exactly what they're doing at Daily Wire. We did many years at PJTV with virtual sets, but when I've been to the Daily Wire office many times. It's magnificent. And they've done such an amazing job. But having a practical set means that you can light it, you can move around a little more, you can have a second camera, you can do all kinds of things. And with the fundraising, we might even be able to have, who knows, maybe even have an engineer and switch cameras, all kinds of things like that. That would be pretty cool. So that's one of the things we want to do. But Stratosphere Lounge will stream directly to the website. We'll be able to take questions and comments from the website. And this is the world that we are building now. And there's a number of reasons for this. Look, we don't have the resources. And when I say resources, I mean we don't have 6 or 7 figures. We don't have $6 or $7 million necessary to do the marketing, the ad campaigns, layout, the all of the account, all this stuff. We just don't have it. And to be honest with you, I don't really think that's what I want to do. I really enjoy this environment, and what we need to do is we need to use, bring back some firewalls and use the edited versions of the existing shows that we're doing to expand the community out. And if we can get to 10,000 members, we will be golden. So for those of you out there who were members, we're going to ask you to remember, and I think we finally got something, that we can be proud of, and something that presumably is going to be worth 29 cents a day. So there we go. Alrighty. So on to Facebook, or off of Facebook, as I like to say. Here we go. Oh, this is so exciting. Oh, by the way, when I first started the stream, there was a comment there on the chat, in the live chat, that said, I wonder if he will ever get to my question, or if he will get to my question. And it sounded so plaintive and so honest, and it was from Martin Archer, so I'm going to do his question first. I'm going to find it. Oh, and one more thing. You know, we got a pretty big vault here. We've got, I don't know, 5,000 hours. We've got 300 or 400 firewalls and afterburners, at least that, I would think. And so one of the things that we could do with this additional funding is we could get an editor on this, and then we could go back and look at all of the existing firewalls, which average 7-8 minutes, and we could find the best 2 minutes on a particular subject, let's say. So here's 2 minutes from the firewalls, putting them back out there for people to see, taking, we're not restricting ourselves to what that particular firewall was about. So if there's a good 2 minutes on how capitalism works and a firewall about, the Air France flight, then we'll chop that up, we'll send it out. I'm thinking maybe we could call it the 2-minute warning. We could call it firewall, 2-minute warning. And we'd basically repackage some of the existing messages in a much more chewable form, get them out there, and reintroduce some people to some of these things that need to be out there. One of the reasons I've slowed down on the firewalls, is I talked to Scott, is like, I just don't know what else to say about socialism when we just re-edit these things. But there are some things to talk about. The one I've got in mind is called, there's a famous book, I want to say it came out in the 70s, about the destruction of America's educational system. This was in the 70s. There was an educational system then called Why Johnny Can't Read. And I'm thinking the next firewall is going to be called Why Johnny Can't Think. And yes, I do not own the PJTV stuff. I wish I did. The show I did with what's his name were fantastic. We're now on the third almost done. So one or two almost dones to go, and I'll be done. And I will ask the fans. I will ask the members for firewall ideas. Members. Oh, what was it? Come on, Billy. We're talking about repackaging. Something to do with PJTV. I remember. Yes, this is the last thing. Before, one more thing. This son of a bitch has taken so much of my money and delivered so little that it's just. Don't anybody tell him. Don't anybody tell him anything. Okay? Don't anybody tell him anything. Anyway, flew out of my head again, as it's wont to do. We were repackaging PGT. Yes, I remember. I don't know whether it needs to be renamed, or probably not. It just needs to get out there more. But I have to tell you, Scott and I shoot 3 times a week usually, and after we're done, at least half the times, maybe more often than not, I get a question that I don't know how I'm going to answer, and we got one on Amtrak, and we got one on I forget what the last one was. FBI DNA database, and I want to make sure I'm crystal clear on this. I amaze myself by the answers that come out on Bill Whittle now, especially. And it's not because of me at all. It's because this philosophy is so coherent and so powerful. When you understand it and how it works, there is essentially nothing that people can ask you about or try to stick you with where you don't have a perfectly fine solution. And we're selling common sense and decency. That's the formula. Common sense and decency. And and when I get these questions about things that I haven't thought about at all, like the DNA thing, there's talk about FBI keeping a DNA database on people. What's the answer to that? How do you deal with that? And I don't know this question's coming. I'm thinking on my feet. That's one we shot earlier this morning. So what's the answer? So using these conservative principles, I was able to say, well, let's find out. One answer, let's look at the extremes. You could either eliminate DNA testing completely, but DNA is a valuable thing to make criminals go to jail and get innocent people out of jail. That's important, nice to have. So what's the other extreme? The other extreme is where there's a DNA database of all Americans. It's been kept when you're born and they've got it and so on. And the answer that we eventually were able to walk out to, with Scott and I working it back and forth, is that DNA testing ought to be done the same way that any other invasion of our privacy is done under legal means. It should be subject to Fourth Amendment scrutiny. There should be a warrant issued based on probable cause, and that when that DNA sample is taken, certainly if you're acquitted and probably if you're convicted, but once that sample is taken for that particular case, that information has to be destroyed. In other words, we're going to get this, we're going to use it to determine proof of innocence or guilt based on probable cause with the case being made to a judge. And then if that is found to be reasonable cause, then the DNA sample is taken, and certainly in the case of acquittal and likely in the case of a conviction, after that information needs to be destroyed. And what we ended up with, just so you know how these things kind of work, because you'll see it today or tomorrow. It's up tomorrow, I think. So what that discussion led to was a discussion of, okay, so what's reprehensible? I know a world without DNA testing would be a world where fewer criminals went to jail and innocent people who were in jail weren't set free. DNA is useful, but it's very powerful. And what we got down to is the idea that you have to be able to destroy information. But Scott pointed out that nothing is ever destroyed. There's a record kept of everything. And that led me to think that no, the issue really is we need legal mechanisms and third-party independent watchdog organizations that are constantly testing to make sure that information that we want destroyed is destroyed. When I log out of Facebook and I say I'm done with Facebook, I want that information destroyed. I want it erased and I want it gone. And I want it to be gone. And I think it's time for the American people to hire some insiders at Google and Facebook to test, to make sure that it's gone. Which led us to the final conclusion of that particular episode, which I guess you don't have to watch now. But the final conclusion of it was, look, if you're in favor of an FBI database of DNA in order to prevent crime, then what you really, really ultimately are dealing with all the information kept on file and all the rest of it, you really, when it's finished and said and done, what it really comes down to is the presumption of innocence. Do you live in a society, or do you want to live in a society where you are presumed to be innocent and the state has to prove you guilty? Because in a world like that, there is no FBI DNA database. You're innocent. You are an innocent person. We have no information on you. We have no surveillance on you. We don't keep any track of any of your private businesses. It's none of our business. The government should be out of that. If it turns out that you were either involved in a crime, either that you committed or you're peripherally involved with something that looked like it might have implicated you, then we have a very effective process when it works of having a judge determine whether there's probable cause to do an invasion of your privacy. At that point, then you gather that sample, and after it's done, you destroy it, because we believe in the presumption of innocence. And if we don't fight against this, then we are really in trouble, because the existence of the database is the presumption of guilt. It's the presumption of guilt. If there's an FBI database, why wait till you're an adult to be swabbed? Why not just take DNA prints of everybody at birth, put them in the giant FBI file, and then that way, when you commit a crime, which is apparently going to happen any second now, the government will be able to instantly know who you are and where you are and what you did. And they'll be able to say, well, we picked up some DNA residue of you in Starbucks at 4:20 p.m. and then at 4:26 p.m. we also detected it on a sensor we have at the gas station. And during that time, there was a murder committed in that area, so we'd like you to come in and have a little talk with us. I don't want to live in that world, and you don't either. Now, the reason I bring all this up is that these are discussions that came out in real time, live, that I didn't have time to think about, and they're procured by Scott's question and his follow-up questions because he doesn't let me off easy. He needles me with the replies, and then you have to be able to not only make the case and defend the case, you have to defend the case against the rebuttal. And this is the reason I brought it up. It's easy to do. It's easy to do, and it's only easy to do because these ideas really work. We were talking about this morning. I said, Scott, I don't know how this happens. I don't know where it comes from, but my God, I mean, this really works. And he said, that's why they call them timeless principles, brother. So. Something to be said for timeless principles. I'm in favor of them. Some people are against them. As for me, I'm for them. All right, let's see what we got. I will be happy to be done with Facebook. Happy. All right, so Eric Blake has a couple of Star Trek questions, which I will get to. I'm going to get to them, but I am going to deal with Martin Archer's question first. So I'm going to go looking for it because that was so heartfelt and plaintive. I just like watching a little kitten, outside the window in the cold and the snow. It's like, let's see what we got. Martin Archer, miscreant of the First Order. Yeah, I haven't seen much of famed miscreant lately. I suppose he's hiding from the world for his miscreancy. I hope this is the one from Martin Archer, top fan, miscreant of the First Order. Did you ever read any of the Flashman novels? Quite possibly the most un-PC character ever. He's a brilliant historical invention. Arthur George MacDonald Fraser's attention to accurate 19th century historical detail is second to none. He was an outspoken conservative. He is also famous for writing one of the most highly regarded wartime combat memoirs, Quartered Safe Out Here, about his experience in World War II. And then comes a link to the Flashman Papers. Martin, I have never heard of the Flashman Papers, and I've heard of most things. Never heard of it. I'm looking forward to reading the YouTube entry, the Wikipedia entry on it. I'm sure that'll put the hook in me because it sounds very intriguing, but I'm glad you brought it up. I hadn't the faintest idea, hadn't heard about it at all. So once again, I get to be smarter as a result of you people, and I'm sorry I don't have any more comments to make on it because I've simply never heard of it before that moment. But I'm looking forward to it, and we can talk about it in the future. So moving along. All right, I got. How do you not like this beginning from Eric Blake? Greetings, Vectron, Bill Whittle. It's actually just Vectron would be sufficient. Thank you. Here's a Star Trek question for you. What makes you think I'm able to take a Star Trek question, Eric? I mean, we'll try. We'll try. You've talked a lot about your vehement hatred of Star Trek: The Next Generation. I don't vehemently hate Star Trek: The Next Generation. It's not interesting enough for me to vehemently hate it. It's like you just don't vehemently hate being splashed by tepid water. But let's move on. So a question no one seems to have asked is have you ever seen the other main universe Trek shows, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and Enterprise? If so, what's your take on them? If not, I cannot recommend Deep Space Nine high enough. It's a beautifully conservative deconstruction of the utopian leftism in Next Generation, piece by piece. I get it. I've heard similar things about Deep Space Nine, and I know that there's a lot of depth in that show. But I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes, and it's I don't know. I don't watch Star Trek to see what's going on at a bus station. I don't mean to be flip about it, but that's really it. I don't get the point of a Star Trek show that doesn't go anywhere. A number of people immediately set phasers to Puri. Foghorn gets off a good one. A lot of people immediately said they prefer Babylon 5, and I do too. I watched Babylon 5 back in Florida in the mid '90s, I guess. I watched it. I think it was on every night, so it must have been when they were done or anything. I watched Babylon 5 a lot, and I while I didn't much like the universe. I thought that in fact the first season with what's his name, not Sheridan. Anyway, it'll come to me. Somebody will put it up there. I thought, and then they put Bruce Boxleitner in, and man alive, he was just great. And one of the most wonderful things, Sinclair, one of the most wonderful things about that is that when I got out here and they started, dealing with conservatives in show business, one of the people that I got to spend the most time with back almost 10 years ago now, I guess, 10 years ago, was Bruce Boxleitner. We hung out. He's a great guy, just a terrific guy. I haven't seen him in a couple of years now, but Bruce was just wonderful, just a really, really cool guy, very friendly. The guy who played Garibaldi Doyle. Yeah, Jerry Doyle had a conservative radio show. I don't know what's happened to him. Ivanova was great, and I really liked it. And getting to know Cheryl says that Bruce is married to Melissa Gilbert. I don't think that they are anymore. I think they divorced quite a while ago, and I think it had a lot to do with the fact that Bruce was a conservative. Heart attack for Jerry Doyle. That's a shame. Anyway, it was great, and it was great to talk to him about the inside of the show, and the guy who played it's been a while, the Centauri ambassador, wonderful man. According to Bruce, I never met him. Bill Mooney was on that show, and I saw Bill Mooney veer. Yeah, he was great. He was fantastic. He was just terrific. And I saw Bill Mooney at a tiny little Mexican restaurant in a corner of a mall, where we used to go and eat lunch quite a lot back during the writer's strike when I was convinced I'd never work again or anybody else. And I saw Bill Mooney at this little restaurant. I mean, a restaurant with maybe 7 tables, that kind of thing. And I was sure it was him. He was there with his son. For those of you that don't know, Bill Mooney was Will Robinson, and Will Robinson was the definitive, he was the greatest influence on my childhood life, probably on my life. By the time I got to Star Trek, I was already a teenager. Didn't run in Bermuda. I didn't see Star Trek until after Star Trek was over. But Lost in Space, I watched every night, and I remember the first episode of Lost in Space, the black and white episode, which was good because in Bermuda we only had a black and white station. And I remember that first episode of Lost in Space, and the Jupiter 2 takes off, and then the robot destroys the navigation system, and all this stuff is flying around. But I remember the end of the first episode of Lost in Space, where John Robinson had to go out and spacewalk to repair something, and he goes through the airlock of the Jupiter 2, and then he attaches something real thin, like a cable, like about the size of a clothesline, for those of you who know what that is, and started floating away, and then the clothesline snapped, and John Robinson is floating away from the ship. He's out there, And just when you're thinking, my God, what's going to happen? It's like, da-da-da, da-da-da. And then they had this weird Western kind of font. It was like, it was essentially the same thing as tune in next bat time, next bat station, but it was to be continued. And I thought, what? It was awesome. The first season of Lost in Space was actually really pretty good science fiction. And I didn't know what happened to Lost in Space until recently, relatively recently, 2-3 years ago. But the first episode of Lost in Space was really pretty serious and very cool. Very cool. First episode was cool. Second episode, they find this giant space station with this weird sort of entrance, and they go in there. Tune in same time next week, same time, same channel. And they fly into the space station, and then they crash land on the planet, and then John Robinson's flying around on the jetpack, and they're taking the chariot, and the chariot's going to where it's hot, and then it's cold, and then they're crossing an ocean, and there's this giant cyclops. It was fantastic. It was great. And I guess that in some reasons, John Galt, USA, said he was into Penny Robinson, myself, and I don't know why the Penny and Judy thing never developed the same way that the Marianne and Ginger thing did, but Judy was phenomenal. Her father, the actress who played Judy Robinson, her father was an SS officer, and I think she was either Norwegian or German. I imagine if your dad's an SS officer, you're German, but she was great. Never seen her before or since, but I thought that show was fantastic. Never really liked John Robinson very much. I liked Major West an awful lot. I thought he was just fantastic. Yeah, I've seen the original movie. It's great. Major West he was awesome. He was fantastic. And as I've gotten older and got a chance to watch them all again on Hulu, I realized that that the Major West Dr. Smith rivalry it's the difference between the intellectual and the person of action. It's the difference between a conservative and a progressive. It was great. I didn't even know they did a reboot show. Who cares? I'm sure it was terrible because I'm sure it was very PC. Yeah, John Galt's got it. It was a difference between a hero and a coward, and a guy who's straightforward and brave and competent versus a guy who's extremely intelligent, cowardly, and useless. Worse than useless. Robinsons would have been home in a week if they just spaced Dr. Smith. Same thing with Gilligan. If they just drowned Gilligan, they would have been off the island in 3 days. But anyway, all of this stuff in the first episode was great, and the Mylar, silver jumpsuits, which looked like the Mercury suits, was great. All of it was great. The stasis capsules and stuff was great. And then season 2 happened, and look, as a kid, I thought, all right, crush, kill, and destroy. Okay, sure. I was a young kid. I didn't mind it so much. But I do remember even as a young kid, I was getting a little bored with the fact that everything took place on the planet now. I wanted to see him back in space again. They crash land the ship in the first season. Second season, pretty much entirely on the planet, as I recall. In the third season, I think they began by getting off the planet. But it's like, all right, I've seen it. But what I didn't realize until much later, because I watched them all as an adult in order, was that the show in the second season fundamentally changed. And I would watch the second season as an adult, and I would say to myself, my God, what is Jonathan Harris thinking? What is he thinking? What is he thinking? He is in he's not only not in the same show, he's not really even in the same society. He's not even part of the same civilization. Jonathan Harris was so far out there, and just playing this camp. I couldn't believe how awful it was. And then somebody told me, or I read someplace, that the reason that Lost in Space, which voice, the Dr. Smith voice? Oh, the pain, the pain. Oh, my back, my delicate back, you bubble-headed booby. I can't do it. Maybe if I practiced a little more, but look, he was funny. But I kept thinking, what happened? And what happened was, between the first season and the second season of Lost in Space, what happened was Batman happened. And Batman came out, and as a little kid, I took Batman completely seriously. I didn't get any of the camp. I didn't realize that there was anything funny when Bruce Wayne goes into the Batcave and sees a picture of his house, and then the subtitle on the house says "Stately Wayne Manor." I never thought that was funny. I didn't think there was anything funny about Batman. I didn't think there was anything funny about him doing the Batusi. I didn't think there was anything funny when he would say things like he and Robin are dressed in their satin outfits in the middle of a party, and they're going into a nightclub or something, and they're here, these two guys dressed as superheroes in this room full of normal people, and then the maitre d' says, can we get your table, Batman? And Batman says, yes, but not too close to the front. We wouldn't want to attract attention. That's just genius. That's genius. That's brilliant. And Adam West delivered it perfectly. But the success of Batman and all of the camp on Batman led to Lost in Space. Going down this road, which was just unbelievable. Culminating in the Great Vegetable Rebellion, where they land on a planet of vegetables, and the lead characters are talking carrot, and Dr. Smith turns into celery or something. Just the actors could not believe how bad the scripts were, and they couldn't believe what happened to the show. Guy Williams, who played John Robinson, was Zorro. He was a pretty big TV star. They convinced him to do the show. Okay, and Penny was a rising star too. They convinced her to do the show, and they're all on board for the show. And they look at the first season, and the first season looks pretty good. And then all of a sudden, they're just not there anymore. The whole from season 2 on, it was Will, Dr. Smith, and the robot. And I loved Will, and I loved Dr. Smith, and I didn't love Dr. Smith. I loved Will, and I loved the robot. Loved the robot. The robot was my friend. The B9 robot was my friend. Anyway. So all of this to say that I saw Bill Mumy in this little Mexican restaurant, and I was sure it was him. And I finished eating, and I'm very careful about this, because when you're out here with celebrities, it's just generally not done, But I walked up to him and I said, "Are you Bill Mumy?" He said, "I am." I said, "I just want you to know. I know you've heard this many times before, but Will Robinson changed my life. He changed my life, and I think your son should know that the work that you did on that show inspired millions of people to be smart and work hard and get into science. And I just wanted to thank you. I've wanted to thank you for 50 years now, and here you are." And he was very nice, and I could see his son light up a little bit, and it was great. So anyway, that's the Lost in Space Star Trek reference that led from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine to Babylon 5 to Lost in Space to a Mexican restaurant. That's how it works around here. Another question from Eric Blake, but I'm going to try and get some other people in here. So, my God. Let's see. Sarge, 56. What is the sticky wicket on the Brexit deal? Will there truly be chaos in the streets on April 1 if no deal is reached before then? I am arriving in London on April 2nd from Italy. I'm not really up on the latest, Sarge, but the Brexit thing is a very clear example of why we're in the trouble we're in over here and in the West in general. The British people decided that they didn't want to be in the European Union. They voted themselves out of the European Union. It was a fair election, and the vote was not overwhelming, but it was clearly a vote to leave the European Union. and the unelected elites that make up all of the bureaucracy decided that the British people had made the wrong decision. And so they basically said, well, since the British people have made the wrong decision, we're going to make sure that we stall this until they make the right decision. It was one of those cases like the election of Donald Trump. They put the choice to the American people for a vote, certain that they would vote the way that they were supposed to vote. And when the people didn't vote the way that they were supposed to vote, then the government said, well, obviously, you don't understand that this was a mistake that you made, and we know better for you than you do for what's good for you. So we're just going to kind of basically pretend like it didn't happen, and we're going to wait until the next election cycle, and then we'll try it again. And we'll keep trying until you make the right decision, which is the decision to keep all of us in power and money. And this is the world that we live in, and we see it here as well as there. I don't know what to say about it other than just that somebody, the only way to defeat these kind of people is to have a politician with the guts to call them out and say exactly what's happening. Theresa May should have said, listen, the British people made a decision. I'm elected as a result of that decision. Votes count. Elections have consequences. The British people have elected to leave the Union, and I am here to get us out of the Union, and you don't get to continue voting until you get the results you want. So, get out of the way. And if you're going to take over the country, if you're going to run the country against the will of the people, I'm not going to let you do it without saying that this is what this is. If you don't let this country, if you continue to do all of these blocking and obstacling and stuff that you're doing, I'm going to tell the British people the truth about what's going on is, and what's going on is this is a coup against the British people on the part of an unelected bureaucracy that is simply determined that they know what's better for regular people than they do. And just boom, and just keep on hammering it. But that's obviously not happening. So as far as Brexit goes, it's been 2 years now, and it's like the wall. It's like, okay, well, we voted for it. Where is it? A little song and dance, the delay. Maybe the American people forget about the wall if we just delay it long enough. We'll do one or two more, and then I'm going to get going. I talked about the California train debacle by accident. There's a question from Louis Anderson. Hope we covered that. Okay. Here we go. There's a couple questions. One from Merlin, who, again, we're very happy to hear good news from. And another one right below that from Charles Tomes, and they're both about Jesse Smollett, which we have done a right angle on, which I suspect is up by now, but if not, it will be. So we both, it's a particular show I brought, and Scott and Steve have some great things to say about it too. But to answer both of these questions just very briefly, for those of you that are not familiar with it, Jesse Smollett is an actor, young black gay actor on Empire, which is a very popular show. And he basically claimed that he was assaulted, called the N-word and the F-word by unidentified right-wing conservatives who were wearing MAGA hats, Make America Great Again hats. And when they said there's no place for an N like you in our America, needless to say, every single left-winger said, see, here's the evidence that Donald Trump supporters are just horrible, nasty racists, and all of this racism in America and hatred that we've been talking about forever. Here's a perfect example of it. Yeah, in MAGA country. Well, it turns out that the two people doing the beating and the cursing and the insulting were Nigerians, extras on the show that Jussie hired to rough him up a little bit, and so that he could do the one thing that he had to do given his background and his political leanings, and that is to achieve recognition by the only means that really matters, and that is by achieving victimhood. He basically, yes, I called it Laoyus AOC, sorry if I didn't get that right. Synthetic outrage, I've been talking about this for a while. When there's not enough actual injustice in America to produce some evidence, and there isn't, then they have to make synthetic injustice. They have to manufacture it. And, oh good, he was charged with a felony, good. He called the police, said he'd been beaten up, and what Jussie Smollett did was, he bore false witness against all of us. He basically bore false witness against conservatives, against Trump supporters, against Republicans, against white people. He basically told the world that we had committed a crime against him, that wasn't committed, that he actually happened. And here's the thing about this with the Jussie thing. The Jussie thing is really important because the left claims that there's so much racism and homophobia in America that it's not safe for people, and therefore we need the left in order to change this horribly corrupt society. But when you look at the entire United States of America over the course of years and years and years, and you can't find one single episode, not one episode, where it actually happens, and you are forced to manufacture evidence to prove a point of view about people you disagree with, you're convinced they're racist, but there's no evidence that they're racist, so I'm going to make evidence to show that they're racist. Well, that is evidence. It's not just an absence of evidence. In other words, it's not just showing that there's no sign of, there's no proof that there's racism in America and homophobia. It's not only a lack of proof, it is in fact proof that there isn't any. If you have to manufacture an event in order to claim that this country is as biased and as hateful as you claim it is, and if you cannot find a single example of this, and in order to prove it, you have to create the evidence, then that is not just a lack of proving that this is a racist country. It proves that it's not a racist country. It is not just absence of evidence. It is evidence of absence. It's not there. And that's the most important thing about this. And during the right angle, we also talk about having him erased from history and all the rest of it, which is also kind of interesting. I won't bore you with that. I think maybe we'll do one more and then we will call it a night. I'll head back to my beautiful wife who's presumably watching this, and better be, because there's going to be a quiz afterwards. Let's see, we'll do one more. Yeah, why not? This is from Joseph Talbot. Hang on. I just clicked on the button and I lost the question. I'll be right there. Okay. This one's going to be personal, obviously. I guess they're all personal. Joseph Talbot, question is, I'm seeing tons of MGTOW, I don't know what that is, MGTOW, Red Pill, I know what that is, and other men's videos on YouTube warning of all the women to avoid. I want to hear about what it's like when you find a woman you can trust. You're the man for that story. I am, actually. Thank you. When I ask people, when people ask me about what it's like living in California before I got married, I said, and I think this is really as pithy as it gets, the situation in Los Angeles and among liberals, at least in very, very blue territory, the thing about dating out there is that the men are weak and the women are crazy. and the crazy women make men weak, and the weak men make women crazy, and men going their own way. Run from romance. Okay. Wow, this is a great. Oh yeah. Okay, men going their own way. I did promise I would not mention, and I'm not going to mention the name of it. But the more I promote this idea of doing these video game videos, and the more I talk about video games, the more convinced I am about this. 100% convinced of it. And I'm going to talk about young men because it's primarily young men. My thesis, and I think the evidence for this gets stronger every day, certainly gets stronger every time I have to make this pitch. My thesis is this. Young men in America today call themselves socialists, vote socialist, do all the right things, go to the right events, walk out on the gun protests and stuff, call themselves liberals, and believe it. Believe it. They believe it. It's not like they're pretending. In the world, they're liberals because they have to be. What the hell happened? Hello? There we go. They have to be. So, being conservative in California may not be as true for some of you, but for those of you that live in blue state areas, you realize how suppressive and how intimidating and how violent the left is. You can't just go to a restaurant and say loud enough to be heard that I think Donald Trump's doing a great job. People will throw coffee in your face. I mean, they really will. You can say it, but that's what they'll do. So part of the left-wing movement to re-engineer people is. So this is actually going to be a pretty compelling argument and story. So hang on here. If you are a weak person, if you're a beta male or you're a feminist or somebody who's filled with resentment and envy and wants power, but you don't have the energy, the smarts, or the guts to take it, not that anyone should take it, there are certain things that you have to destroy. If you want a socialist society filled with pliable people who will do what you tell them to do because you've got this genetic defect, that means you have to tell people what to do. When you have a goal, when you're lazy and stupid and you want to take over society and have people do what you tell them to do, then in order for that to happen, you have to create a society that is more lazy and stupid than you are. And so what one of these targets is individuality. You can't have individuals. The whole purpose of the self-esteem movement, which was we're going to give everybody a participation trophy. No one's going to win. Nobody's going to lose. Everybody gets an equal participation trophy, was designed presumably to build people's self-esteem. But looking back on it for 20 years now, I realize, no, what it's designed to do is it's designed to make sure that nobody stands out. It's designed to make everybody an absolutely equally bland cog in the machine. There are no winners, there are no losers. There's no heroism, there's no cowardice, there's nothing. It's simply just a giant heat-dead entropy exit group of mush that they can control. And so certain things have to be destroyed. And in order to get people to that state, you have to destroy a number of things, but the most important thing you have to destroy really is individuality, and this is why the attack goes to so-called toxic masculinity, because this is a society built for individuals, built by individuals, for individuals, and individuality is the end of the left. The entire philosophy of progressivism is one giant emperor's new clothes case of peer pressure, where everybody convinces everybody else that they see something that they don't personally see in order to feel like they fit in and they belong. This is an overwhelming psychological impulse for people. I was at an event recently. Somebody told me about an experiment that I heard that I should have been using this whole time, but I didn't. But basically, they did an experiment where the subject went into a room full of people. Everybody else in the room, let's say 12 people, and let's say a scientist or whatever. Everybody else is in on the experiment. The entire experiment is judging the reaction of the one person that goes in who's not part of the experiment. And so what they do is they basically say, have a board with two pieces of string on it, and one of them is this long, and one of them is that long. And they go to the first person and say, which one of these is longer? And the first person points to the bottom one. And the subject looks at this. The guy's out of his mind. Are you kidding? So they go to the next person. Which one of these is longer? And they point to the shorter one. And he's mystified. And then they go to the third person. They ask him, which one of these is the shorter one? Or the longer one, rather. And he points to the short one. And then they do this 7 or 8 or 9 times. And these people are professional actors. So after watching 9 or 10 people clearly choosing something that is obviously not correct. Here's a length of string. Here's another length of string. Which one of these is longer? The bottom one is. There's no question about it. It's not a report or anything. It's right in front of your eyes. And he's taken this thing from person to person to person, and every single person says, oh, the bottom one is the longer one. And by the time you get to the test subject, what's going through his mind is this. The first time somebody says the wrong answer, he thinks the guy's an idiot or is a joke. Second time, it's like, come on, really 2 idiots in a room? Third time, it's like, what's going on here? Fourth time, is this some kind of joke? Fifth time is like, no, these people are serious. Sixth time is like, good God. Eighth time, ninth time is like, there's something wrong with me. It's got to be me. There's got to be something wrong with me because everybody here agrees that the bottom string is longer. And all these people can't be wrong. They can't all be wrong. And all of them agreed there's wrong. Since these 12 people can't possibly all be wrong, there's got to be something about me. It's the Ash-line test, Sorticus. There's got to be something wrong with me. So that when they finally get to the guy who's the actual subject of the experiment, and they say to him, which one of these is the longer string, he will point to what is clearly the short string because he's convinced that is the answer that everybody else is coming up with, and he doesn't want to look like the one idiot who says something different, but he knows in front of his eyes. And what happens is, psychologically, this is the point, psychologically, a person will become convinced that there's something wrong with them, that they are suffering some kind of mental breakdown, because who are you going to trust? Everybody in the room or your own lying eyes? And so it takes a person of extreme moral courage, believe it or not, to say, I don't know what the rest of you people are smoking, but there's no question that the top string is the longer string. And the reason I know that is because they're sitting next to each other. Let's get a ruler. Most people don't do that. They don't. So they agree. So all of this stuff comes down to agreeing with people. And so when you have that kind of world where those pressures are there, everybody agrees to believe this nonsense, then the one thing you cannot have is heroes. You can't have a hero, and you can't have a free thinker, and you can't have a person who's so confident of themselves that they're willing to stand up and say you're all wrong, all of you. And that has been defined as toxic masculinity. It is now in the American Psychiatric Association diagnostic thing. Toxic masculinity it's defined as a mental disorder, and the mental disorder leads to activities like risk-taking, senses of individuality, personal gain and achievement, selfishness, all this other stuff, right? So they have to destroy this, and so life for young men in America today is one real-world life, is one continuous 8-hour-long ash string experiment where they are told that they must believe stuff that they know is not correct, and they're told they have to behave in a way that they don't want to behave in. And as I've refined this pitch, I've been hitting the same point again and again and again. The left has told them all of these things. They believe it. It's not that they don't believe it. They believe it. So what's happening is young men in this country are leaving the world that we live in. They're leaving the world of universities and the world of politically correct cities and all the rest of it. And the second that they get out of there, the instant that they have time on their own, they go right into their room, they lock the door basically, and they go into a world where they get to act like conservatives. All of the young men of this country are spending more and more time in video games because the world of video games is more real than the world of the millennials up here in the so-called real world. It's more real. And let me give you some examples. They released a game not too long ago, excellent game. I haven't played it, but it looks really, really good. And it's a part 2, it's a Western called Red Dead Redemption. And it's a video game where you get to be in the Old West. And in the first 3 days, Red Dead Redemption sold $550 million. $550 million in the first 3 or 4 days for this video game. And when I tell old Republicans, because most of us are old, when I tell old Republicans that all these people who are voting for Bernie Sanders and out there blue as can be, when I tell them that the reason they don't see them anymore, the reason that they can't rip them away from the computer screens in the room behind the door is because they're busy playing cowboys and Indians. When I tell them that, they look at me with the same look that I had when I first realized that this is exactly what's happening. All of these progressive young men are going into a world where they can play cowboys and Indians without people giving them a load of crap over it. They get to play cowboys and Indians, and they do it by themselves because if they did it in public, they would never hear the end of it. Ever. So these young men who are not allowed to do anything, they're told all their lives they're potential rapists, and it's just a matter of time, and they're evil for being males, and they're evil for being white, and they're evil for being Christians. Remember all of these things, and they don't fight it. I don't blame them. They know the pressure that's aligned against them and all the social media, so they go, no, you're right, terrible. It's just terrible. I'm trying my best to be, as woke as I can be in there. And they're doing all this other stuff. And the second they can get away from these monsters that are lying to them this way, the second that they can get some of their own time and their own money, they lock that door and they fire up that machine and they go into a world where they get to drive fast and shoot things and blow things up and chase hot women and do all of the things that any normal person wants to do, because you cannot beat the biology out of people. You cannot. You cannot beat the biology out of people. No matter how hard the left tries, you can't. So young men have been told that you can't be men. You have to be these little defective girls. They say, okay, well, if that's the rules, that's the rules. And then slam, I'm going to spend the next hour jumping out of transports in Normandy in 1944, and I'm going to go on the ground, and I've had this experience with my own group, with people like Foghorn and so on. I just, most of the time I'm just listening. I'm listening to people doing manly things that are exciting, like, okay, we've got a guy, there's a guy behind that building, somebody move to the right, try and flank him, we'll get some inflighting, okay, suppressive fire. And when I tell old people, old Republicans who have wonder what happened to their grandson, never see him anymore, ever, gone, lost, and they're convinced that they're lost and that these video games are awful and terrible and so on. And I walk up to these people and I tell a veteran who came up to me at the last event, or 2 events ago, a veteran comes up to me and says, I don't know, this is after the pitch, I don't know what happens to my grandson. We used to be very close, but we don't see him anymore. We don't talk to him. I just really worry about him. And I said, sir, I'd be willing to bet you a large amount of money that this guy was a Marine. I said, I'll bet you anything. Your grandson is in that room behind the door being a Marine. I bet you anything that's what he's doing. He's shooting bad guys. He's shooting Nazis, or he's fighting, shooting down airplanes in over Britain, or he's doing something like that. He is doing the heroic kind of stuff that you actually did. And he's doing it in a virtual world because he's not allowed to do it out here. He's not allowed to. So That's what he does, and that's why you can't get him away from it. And if you lived in the world that he lives in, you would do exactly the same thing. If you could not be the person that you are biologically wired to be in this world, and there's somebody offering a world where you could be an actual human being, you would do it. You would do it. And I thought the guy was going to cry. He was so pleased to hear that his grandson had not left the earth. And he asked me, how do I reach him? I said, now, I can't make any promises, sir. I don't know, but I'd be willing to bet you. I can essentially guarantee you that whatever game he's playing in there, he's got weapons for sure. But very likely he's playing Call of Duty or Battlefield or something, and he's being historical. He's playing your life. He's trying to be you. He's fighting bad guys and Nazis and Japs and all the rest of this stuff that's told that we can't do out in the real world. And he said, "How can I reach him?" I said, "Well, I think if you were to talk to him, I would simply say, I wouldn't try to chum him up and ask him about what the game he's playing, but I would basically let him know that you are in on the secret now, and I would say to him, I don't know if this is of any interest to you or anything, but I'm sure you must be doing a lot of things in there with covering fire and squad tactics and movement and flanking, suppressing fire and all that other stuff. And I actually got trained with that in real life. So, if you ever want to talk about tactics, just come let me know, because I think I could make you a better player." So men are in this movement, men going their own way. They're going their own way because a small number of people who have very serious mental issues. I don't generally like the entire idea of saying that your political opponents are insane, but without question, the most severe feminists and the weakest of these beta males are exceedingly neurotic people, and they are convinced against all evidence that things should be a certain way, and they're simply not willing to surrender that belief. So they're in a state of acute denial, and they are determining the rules that the rest of these young people have to live by, because they are the loudest and the rudest, and they're getting what they want. But you can't beat the biology out of people. You can't. You cannot. So they go to a world where they get to be men. Somebody asked me at one of these events, after I was done more or less with the pitch for the Aurora project, they said, "Well, Bill, this is all great about men and stuff, but what about women?" I said, "Well, first of all, there's a lot of female game players, a lot of women playing games, but I can't tell you about their psychology. I can tell you the effect that this will have on young women is simple, and that is that if you can get behind this project, the way we're going to affect women is we're going to make a lot better men. We're going to make better men, because they are good men, and they're very good men, and they want to be heroes, and they're not allowed to be, and it's a crime. And I've been very hard on millennials, and I continue to be hard on them, but I always have to remind myself that they didn't ask to be raised this way. This wasn't their choice. They didn't ask to not have a who won the baseball game lunatic. One of my favorite things I've heard about this self-esteem movement is that the adults will say, "Well, we're not going to keep score, because if we keep score, there will be people who lose, and those people will suffer self-esteem loss, and therefore they'll become murderers or rapists. So therefore, we're not going to keep score, and when the game is over, everybody is an equal winner." And the person that told me this said, "So the adults don't keep score. But you know who keeps score? The kids keep score. They keep score. They know exactly what the score is. And if it's 13-0, they know it's 13-0, and so the whole thing is nuts." So what you've done now is you've created a world where young men are, there's no way for them to be who they are and date people of their own age group. At least that's what they've been told, and that's what they feel. And I don't blame them one bit. That's what it's like out here. Natasha and I talked to an immigration attorney who looked like he could actually definitely do something about Natasha's daughter coming to visit just on a tourist visa, and we haven't seen her. Natasha hasn't seen her for 3 or 4 years. And this guy said, no problem, we can definitely do it. I said, great. He said, send me the information. And I sent him the information, and I sent it from bill@billwhittle.com. And during the time I was there, he made a couple remarks about Trump, but I just said, he's entitled to his opinion, I don't care. But undoubtedly, he decided to look at bill@billwhittle.com and realized that I was a conservative, so he never answered the email. He never answered repeated replies to the email. I basically had a chance to tell my wife and my daughter-in-law that this looked really, really good. My wife was actually at the meeting. And then I had to tell her that all of this hope that we'd raised is apparently gone because of this kind of political peer pressure and intimidation. And so, to some degree, I know what they're going through. And there it is. So young men are talking about men going their own way because the feminists have ruined everything. The feminists, not just the feminists, the beta males. They destroyed Star Wars on purpose. You can't have a young guy be a fighter pilot. You can't have what's his name? Poe Dameron going out there and doing brave things and using courage to destroy enemies. He's got to be an out-of-control hothead, and the women have everything under control with their pink hair and their plans and their sophisticated strategies that ends up, of course, getting everybody killed. But nevertheless, so they retreat from the real world into the world of computer games and movies and Star Wars. So now the left has gone into Star Wars to pursue them, to teach them that they're thinking the wrong things. They bring all of this feminism and social justice warrior stuff into Star Wars and destroy Star Wars, ruin the religion of post-Christian America, destroy that religion for them, and then they start going into computer games. And one of the computer games that they went into was the Battlefield series, which is extremely popular, billions of dollars in revenues. The game probably costs $100 million to make. It's a very, very expensive AAA game series. And I want to say Battlefield 1, which was set in World War I, made something like, I want to say $4 billion total, something like that. Well, they had the next game coming up, which was Battlefield 5. And Battlefield 5 was going to be a World War II game where the graphics were much better and, as always, improving and stuff. And they had very high expectations for this. And the progressive game studio executives put out a trailer, and I highly recommend this. I might see if I can grab it for next time. The game trailer, teaser trailer for Battlefield 5, showed a resistance fighter on the ground, and these two Tiger tanks come through a battered down wall in a French village, and this person is backing up as these two tanks come at her from either side because you realize, my God, it's a woman. And she continues to back up, and then she gets up, and you find out, you can only imagine how good you must have felt when you find out that she gets up. She's not only a woman, she's a woman missing an arm. She has a prosthetic arm, basically a wooden arm with hooks, and she grabs a baseball bat wrapped with barbed wire, and using her prosthetic arm, beats a 6'5" SS soldier to death with this thing. And they're calling this the World War II experience, which, as anybody who served on the Western Front in World War II knows very well, that the number of one-armed women in combat was at least 50%. And then this guy, when gamers said, look, this is a historical game, you're doing a World War II game, and we're playing it because we're fans of World War II, and I'm sorry, but it wasn't every other person in the platoon was not a woman in World War II. This was what the gamers said. They said this is not historical. It pulls us out of the game. We want to have a World War II experience, and having every other person being a woman and hearing all these high-pitched voices calling for ammunition takes us out of the game. The response of the studio was, you're an uneducated, stupid, bigoted, ignorant misogynist. There were, in fact, women in World War II. To which these well-educated gamers said, well, if that's the case, there certainly were. Why don't you include a character who's a Russian sniper? Because the Russians had sniper units of some women, but this idea that every other woman in the 82nd every other person in the 82nd Airborne is a woman is just ridiculous. So the gamers, being reasonable people, said, hey, how about this? Can we have a button? Because the characters are moving. It's just a matter of what skin we put on them. So can we just have a button that says we would like historical accuracy, and that turns the female characters into male characters? And the response from the studio was, one of the developers wrote, would you like us to put that above or below the button that says white people only? Okay, so we know what they think. We know what our political class thinks of us, and now gamers and young people know what the studios think about them. They were nothing but reasonable, and they kept getting this attitude. And when the game had its pre-release party, somebody snuck out some pictures, and all of the people who are in the studio making the game had put up on the wall quotations from gamers who were complaining about the fact that this was historically inaccurate. And they were just talking about how incredibly advanced they were morally compared to these knuckle-dragging savages that actually pay their bills. So when enough heat came on about this, the person who ran that studio, it was it EA? Was it a United EA game, Electronic Arts game? I think it was EA. So EA is a very, very big studio, and they hire individual studios. EA is a giant conglomerate, and they pay individual studios to produce games. And I think it was DICE. I think it was DICE was the company that was doing this World War II game. So basically, the outcry gets large enough, and the person who's the president of DICE, the head developer, basically says, well, I'll tell you why we did it. We were running early alpha on the game, and my young daughter, who plays Fortnite, came to me and said, Dad, why is it that I can't play this World War II game? There's nobody for me to play. There's nobody in this game who looks like me. And the second he said, my daughter said this, I said, the guy's lying through his teeth. But this young 30-something or other guy who's a millionaire, multimillionaire game developer said, how am I supposed to answer my daughter? What am I supposed to say to her when she asks me a question like that? That's why we put women soldiers in the game. My first response was, well, you could say to her that the men were jumping out of airplanes and getting killed so that the woman wouldn't have to. You could start there and work your way down. But anyway, it's a bunch of bullshit. His daughter didn't ask that. He could have said, well, honey, because during World War II, women were not in combat. And game players don't have any problem with future games where women are playing. They don't have any problem with Lara Croft. They don't have any problem with Sigourney Weaver and all the rest of it. So basically, what the game studio said was, hey, we're putting out this game with these women soldiers in World War II, and you can either buy it or not buy it. So they didn't buy it. The thing was expected to make $2 or $3 billion. It made like 400,000 or something. They didn't buy it. And then they applauded the fact that they didn't buy it. And when people wonder why Solo movie tanked, I know, Eric, it's a good movie. I liked it too. But the reason it tanked was because there was a concerted effort to boycott that movie on the part of the hardcore fans because of what they had done with The Last Jedi. They said, all right, if that's how you want to treat it, that's what we're going to do. So if this is not the biggest opportunity for us, I don't know what is. The entire young group of people that are blue as the blue can be, they're blue ocean from coast to coast, vote for liberals, but they hate liberals. They hate them. They hate the social justice warriors. They have ruined the real world for them, and then they ruined Star Wars and the fantasy worlds for them, and then they ruined computer games for them, and they're ruining everything, and they hate them. They hate them. And we're just sitting here pretending like it's not going on. This blue millennial generation is leaving this world to play video games so they can be conservatives. And they want to do the things that young men want to do because you can't beat the biology out of people. And women want men like that. And the closing argument on the face of all this is simply this. They did a survey recently where they asked the most radical young women social justice warriors, the pink-haired lunatics that are, cheering on Antifa, those people. And they asked them, what are you attracted to? What do you think about the men that hang out with you? What do you think about all of these feminist men and all of these gamma males or omega males who are down with feminism and completely woke and all the rest of it? What do you think about them? And these young, ultra left-wing social justice warriors said, don't really do much for me. Which is proof that no matter how angry you are, no matter how bitter you are, no matter how much you have a burning desire to get even with men, and on the part of the young males, no matter how beta you are, how woke you are, doesn't matter how much granola you munch, you cannot beat the biology out of people. The women who are pushing the hardest to completely emasculate all men are the ones that admit that they have no interest in emasculated men. So, progressivism and liberalism is in fact a mental disorder, and it is a disorder brought about by an emotional need that is so overwhelming that it overcomes reason and the evidence of your own eyes. And they then go ahead and create a world for themselves where everybody is reinforcing the same lies. And when somebody speaks the truth, it's very much like the boy saying that the emperor's not wearing any clothes. The whole world comes down if somebody speaks the truth, so that person has to be immediately isolated and destroyed. Martina Navratilova is probably the biggest activist for gay rights when the gay rights movement was really mattering, and she said, no, you can't put me up against a man who thinks he's a woman. It's not fair. He'll kick my ass. And that's a statement of a fact. And Vanessa Williams said the same thing too. She said, if I play against the best male players in the world, they're going to cream me. They've been excommunicated, and they've been told that it's been made clear to them that this is unacceptable, and they usually retract this. And yet, you can't beat the biology out of people. The professionals like Navratilova and Venus and all the rest of them, they understand the truth because this is what they have to do. So this is what's going on. And we have an entire generation that's running from the left into a world where they get to act like we do in real life. And all we have to do is we have to give them permission. And by giving them permission, I simply mean, this is all bullshit, right? This whole, the whole thing is designed to make you feel like you're the only sane person in the world. So we're going to produce product that has classical values of heroism. We're going to produce stories of heroism, of strong men. We're going to provide father figures for men that didn't have fathers. And we're going to basically do a series of science fiction videos that show the qualities that are basically inherent in High Noon. And this is going to be insanely popular because that's what these young people, men and women both, are hungering for. They're hungering for somebody to tell them that no, the whole thing's a lie. It's a spell. They've cast a spell over you. Everybody is saying the same thing because nobody feels that way, but everybody else says that they do. And since everybody else says that they do, you say that you do too, which then becomes evidence for somebody else going through the same thing. So you can bring the whole thing down. It doesn't have to be spread. You don't have to work on it for 30 or 40 years. You simply can say, no, it's all bullshit. And we know it. And then it collapses. And the blue states just shatter and they turn red because they are red. They are red. The millennial generation says and votes one way, but what they do is something else. And if it turned out that video games consisted of committees getting together and that the big moment of truth at the end of a video game was that everybody gets to go out on the street with their protest signs and march down, Broadway. If that's what video games were about, I'd say we're done. But that's not what, and we're not done, because biology is biology. Conservatism is the belief that there are values that are eternal and built into the human condition, and that there are good and evil, and that evil can be fought, and that goodness has to be taught, and all of these other things. And when you look at the games that these young men are playing, these young men who've decided to go their own way, red pill young men, what you find is, if you look at the story arcs, what you'll find is they parachute into Normandy, and the tough sergeant says, "Who the hell are you? You're a weakling, you're a nothing, you're going to get us all killed." And by the time he's completed the 20 missions or whatever that consists of the run of this game, which is not like the other game, the game we're working on. The other game is players versus players. It's a sandbox. The computer doesn't do anything. But in Battlefield, for example, you do 20 missions or whatever the case may be. And over time, the reward for 50 hours of gameplay is having this strong male sergeant father figure say, "Good job, kid. I was wrong about you. You're a good soldier. You did well. You got guts. I'm proud of you." And this kind of thing just makes my hair stand on end, because it's like, what do you say? The whole thing is propped up by this mutual lie. And all we have to do is say, "It's a lie. You know it's a lie. Of course you know. You know which string is longer." They're jacking you around because they want to control you. They want your money, and they want your power. They're lying to you. It's child abuse. Come on. P.J. O'Rourke gave me permission to be a conservative. He gave me permission because I was hanging out with actors and a bunch of cool people and so on, and I had always thought that conservatives were these real squares and so on, and like the people who were seeing the string, I wanted to hang out with the cool people. And P.J. O'Rourke made it cool, made conservatism cool. He said, "Wait a minute, we're the ones that like to drive awesome cars real fast. They're the weenies that are against this kind of thing. Who's the squares here? You know, they're the ones that want you to wear a bicycle helmet in the shower so you don't hurt yourself. Loud guns, fast cars, hot women. I've been saying it since I started this business. That's it. That's conservatism." And once that happened, once I realized it, then I said, okay, it's okay for me to be a conservative. I don't care if other people are liberal or not. Doesn't matter. I know what's true, you know. And since the subject started out on dating, it turns out that virtually every woman, and even the most inhuman women, and that's a good term for them, even the women who have been so indoctrinated into this insane philosophy, even they cannot have the biology beaten out of them. Even the most left-wing feminist, abortion for the first 2 years after birth people, even these women know and admit that the men that back them, they have no interest in whatsoever, because they're not men. They're just a bunch of weaklings. They're the cuttlefish that are trying to look like women so they can get laid, and it doesn't work that way. So, Loyalist says, "I'm 65 years old, and I still sometimes catch myself thinking, what would my father think of me doing this?" Exactly. And one of the other things that we're selling in this project, this Aurora project, and I've seen it happen with my own eyes in the year or two that we've been doing this, is we are setting standards of behavior, and people are responding to those standards in the same way that young thugs responded to the guardian angels. We're daring people to do the right thing. We're saying, this organization, this particular group of players in this particular game, you don't just get to walk into. Here's what we're about. Go read the website, which you can find at aurorarepublic.space. You'll find our entire philosophy there. If you are one of these people, we'd love to have you. We will put you on a probationary period, and then once we're convinced that you're made out of the right stuff, which is really simple, Common sense and decency, right? That's it. That's all. Common sense and decency. Once we sure you got those things, then you're in. And if you start showing behaviors that goes against either of those values, then you're out. And people love it. There are organizations in this game that have tens of thousands of members, far more organized in terms of group events. They're doing much cooler stuff in terms of spaceships, flying formations with 30 or 40 people. We're not doing that yet. We will be. But the common sense and the decency is there. Sir Webben, since we're having a personal conversation today, says, I got common sense, but decency, I don't know if I want that trait anymore. Yes, you do. You don't want to live in a world without decency. Everything that we fight against is a world without decency. Nazi Germany is a world without decency. Communist Russia is a world without decency. Antifa are people without decency. University students who simply will burn a building down so that they don't have to hear a different opinion. There's no decency there either. You want decency, believe me. It's as important, if not more important, than common sense. So we're out there, and it's attracting people, and I'm listening to what they say. We still don't have anything like the funding we need for this. We're just now getting it ramped up after 7-8 months delay of what I thought it would take. But what I'm seeing players, and since there are people here who are in that organization, I think he was here last time 2-3 weeks ago. But there's a player named Olimir who's a Greek. And he said he'd been playing this game on and off for a while, and he played a couple hours and so on. And then he found our organization, and he said, I see what you're trying to do here. I see what you're trying to do in the real world here, and I can't get enough of this. I'm here every night for 4 or 5 hours because of the company. And this is kind of a nice way to tie the whole thing together in a little bow. It's the company. It's the quality of the people. It's not the quantity. It's the quality of the people. And when Merlin made that announcement about his wife being injured, that was an announcement that overlapped the Stratosphere Lounge, it overlapped BillWhittle.com, and it overlapped the Aurora Republic. And the response that he got didn't surprise me, but prompted him to tell me, I've never met people like this. And I said, me neither. This is why I do what I do. This is the reward. Is people like you. It's a reward. Foghorn here, who's a regular in Stratosphere Lounge, has been a fighter pilot for many years. He actually got to do what I always talk about doing and wanting to do. Sometimes I just feel like I have to hold up a picture of something of me flying formation in a long easy, because I've got 5 hours of formation time in a long easy, which is as close to a fighter as you can get in the civilian world. And I sometimes just want to put that on the monitors so he can see that I've done something that remotely approaches a shadow of what he does or has done. And then once a week at 7:30 p.m., he starts streaming video on how the military operates in this environment. He's done a number of videos just on communications discipline. What are the correct words? What is the minimum you can say? What do we say under what circumstances? Because when you have 30, 40 people in the same place on a server and everybody's talking at the same time, nothing happens. So we'll be out there doing that, and Foghorn or Chamdren will say, all right, calm discipline, or Simon says, we'll say calm discipline, and everybody shuts up. And then we just say what we need to say. And when people watch this, when they watch us doing this, they want to be a part of it. And this is the realization that's taken me 10 years, really. This is not only what we're selling to stay alive, this is what we're about. And when I say we, I mean all of us. I don't mean me, and I don't mean the staff here. I mean, this is it. We, as a group of people, understand what makes this country unique. We love what it does for us. We see how these freedoms work, and we understand that they're not automatic and they're not for free. We see the things that are eroding and destroying this foundation, and we want to do something about it. We want to do something. We don't know whether we can or not, and we can only do what we can do, but we have an obligation to do something to preserve all of this stuff. And the more of this I do, the more I talk to people, the more reactions, the more feedback I get, the more I become utterly convinced that this is, in fact, not only correct, but that the thesis is correct. And not only the thesis is correct, I'm sure the thesis is correct, that they're escaping to be conservatives. I'm also convinced that if you can give them permission and you can get that message out there enough, then people will simply say, well, you know what, I don't care. I don't care what you say about Bernie Sanders. I'm running a shipping company in this game. I'm making virtual money. It feels great. And to hell with you. And if we get enough people saying to hell with you, then you get the tipping point, right? You get this thing that's kind of in balance, and then some things start to move. And as they start to move, it tips a little more. And as they start to tip a little more, then more things start to move. And then it's just gone. It's over. It's done. They're done. We're not done. We're based on biology. We can be defeated, but you cannot. But we can be defeated politically, but you cannot beat the biology out of people. So ultimately, we win one way or another. So we need the resources to do that, and that's what we're going to do. So from now on, we're going to be working as a pack, not as a herd, not as a group, not as a community, and not as a collective, but as an association of individuals who have the same values and want them to be passed on to people and know that they're important and want to do it in a way that's effective rather than sending money to a candidate or John Cox or the Heritage Foundation or something. We need to talk to people. We need to talk to them where they are in the language that they understand, and we need to get them, and that's what we're going to do, by God. So that's the plan. Where can we find the link for the Aurora Republic 501? Well, I will post it here, and it is going to be spread around. Don't you worry. I'm going to double check this unless Foghorn beats me to it because he is the keeper of this, but I'm pretty sure it is. 1 second. Don't join the wolf pack. The wolf pack are a bunch of, under any circumstances, do not join the wolf pack. Join the Aurora Project, but do not join the wolf pack because the wolf pack are a bunch of flea-bitten, rabid, low-life alcoholics, drunks, and miscreants of all orders, and it's a bloody miracle. It's an act of grace that we allow them to live in our company. The lowest people of the low. So for God's sake, join the Republic, but stay away from the wolf pack because what a bunch of losers, and here it is. And miscreants and just terrible and just lousy pilots too, by the way, just crummy, lousy pilots, with their repeaters, and every now and then, by sheer luck, they manage to put the what really happens is by sheer luck, an enemy ship will fly into their ongoing stream of bullets, or sooner or later somebody flies in front of that, and then they have the satisfaction of seeing a hit, and then they feel, ooh, wow, this is great. And so that's how the Wolfpack fights. But the Eagles now, on the other hand, Air Combat Element 1, Ace 1, Squadron 1, which you can find at aurorarepublic.space under Defense, under the Structure menu. You find Eagle Squadron. Now you're talking about actual professionals. Now you're talking about people who don't let the enemy get into close range. We basically train, and we kill people beyond visual range. They don't get to visual range. We take them out. We got the biggest guns that they make. If they make a bigger gun, we'll switch. But we've got a weapon that's good to 8 kilometers out, energy weapon, and it's a one-hit weapon, 2 hits most. And these enemies start flying towards us, and we just pick them off. We pick them off. They don't even see us. So if you want to join the Republic, please do. If you want to join a fighter squadron, there's several to take your pick from. We're looking for squadron leaders for transport squadrons, support squadrons, any number of squadrons, electronic warfare squadrons. But I would encourage you simply to see if what's his name? It's a male model name. Hang on. John Boyd is the leader of the Eagle Squadron. The Wolf Pack is led by a guy. It's a stage name of some kind. I had it here, and I just can't remember it. He's a punk too. He's just a terrible, crappy, shitty pilot. Sorry, but that's just there. Hang on a minute. Come on. What is this guy's name? Ethan Wright. Yeah. So anyway, you go to aurorarepublic.space and you can look up the premier fighter squadron of the Aurora Republic, Ace 1 Eagles, which are effective because we train and we have talent and we don't spend our time drinking and sleep until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and by 7:30 there are no more bad guys, and we can come home and relax and smoke our pipes by the fireside. But nevertheless, see, one of the things you'll notice about the Wolfpack is that they're always making sexual references, and they're always making sexual references because they're children, and children do those kind of things. So I still don't have those pictures, but I will have them next week. Next week I will. No, not correct. Eagles versus Wolfpack is not Marines versus Navy. Eagles versus Wolfpack is like F-15Cs on a combat air patrol at 35,000 feet, engaging targets beyond visual range, versus the Civil Air Patrol in a Cessna 172 with the door closed and the seatbelt buckle outside banging against the side of the ship. That's the difference between the Eagles and the Wolfpack. We're also looking for gunners, by the way. The Vanguard is a big girl. She's a big, strong, twin-engine, highly powerful, extremely lethal weapons platform. And concurrent with our ability to destroy people beyond visual range, we also have a gun turret in the back, which mostly we use for decoration, but also can be used to knock people off of our tail if for some reason they get close enough to be within range of our guns. Then we'll take them off that way. But in any event, you'll be able to see all of this. Let me see. Since he's here, Ethan Wright, I think they made a decision. I think I heard Wolfpack decided that they're gonna go out in Anvil Arrows, which are cool little ships. Got to say, I'll show you a picture. They're really good looking vessels, and they look really cool. And as far as toy spacecraft go, they're very impressive. But in order to actually destroy something, you've got to basically hold the trigger down for 7.5 hours. And we don't have time for that. That's why we do the difficult things. We shoot at a long range with one shot. We hit, and then we go home. We don't sit there all day going... Oh, look, I've got a shield down by 10%. No, we're like... Next. I'll show you a picture of... Here's what they fly. The Wolfpack flies. Hard to find a picture of it that you can take seriously. I'll use this one. I think. Yep. I'm going to lose the sound over this. I'm not going to take the time. So here's the anvil arrow that is flown by the wolf pack. Give me one moment, please, to adjust the television. That's not it.
Right, very possible. Not bad at all.
All right. Nothing like a good glass of Chateau.
Do not let that deceive you. I'm working on it. Scene 4. It's hard to do this on the fly. You are going to be a video, and you're going to take a media source. Nope. You're going to take a media source. I'm still here. Hang on. Mm-hmm. Okay, look, to hell with this. We're just not going to do it. It's going to take too much time. If you want to, if you have access to the Google, you can type in anvil arrow to see what the little flea-bitten pups in the so-called wolfpack fly. It's amusing, certainly. I mean, it's cute. It's the kind of the anvil arrow that the wolfpack flies is the kind of thing that we would have under our wing on a rail in the Eagle Squadron. It's just one of many things that we would just fire off at, just for giggles. Now, if you want to see a real vehicle, if you want to look at a real, actual space superiority fighter, something that's actually going to, win wars rather than, prolong them, you might want to look up the Aegis Vanguard Warden. So I'll put this in the comment section here. So it's anvil arrow for Wolfpack. And it is the Aegis, which is a superb company. Aegis is by far the most sophisticated hardware in the world. Anvil is for people who can't afford real airplane. And the Aegis Vanguard Warden is for Eagles. So we'd love to have you. If you don't... the only thing I have to say about it is, if you're going to join the Wolfpack, knock yourself out and enjoy yourself. You can start right away. If you're gonna apply for Eagles, you've got to be a good shot. You absolutely have to know what you're doing. You don't even get to try out for us until you can routinely kill incoming ships beyond visual range. You just put them in the pipper, fire that big ass gun, and watch for the explosion. When you can do that with some regularity, then we will bring you aboard and teach you some tactics on how to actually make this happen. But anyway, enough about that. I will have some evidence. Yes, it is very much like the P-38 Lightning. It is very much like the P-38 Lightning. It is a... And by the way, you're not useless to the Aurora Republic if you can't fly. We need soldiers. We need policemen. We need administrators. We have Department of Justice. We have Department of State. We have, if you've got any kind of skill, we have Department of Commerce, Treasury. If you've got any kind of skill of anything, we need you. So please come on over and sign up. It's not even necessary that you play the game. But I'll have some recruiting materials for next time, and that'll be fun, I suspect. Alrighty then, look at that. Hey, almost 3 hours. Made up a little bit for the lapse for the last 2 weeks. Sorry about that. I carried an M16, and you carry that. Yeah, here's one for you, Ethan. You're worthless and weak. Your squadron does nothing. They are nothing. I flew an Aegis Vanguard, and you fly that arrow. See how much fun it is? It's fun. All right, I'm on my way home, baby. That applies to Natasha. Anybody else who got a little thrill up their leg over that, I'm sorry to have to disappoint you. Is this a document? Oh, God, something up there. Holy cow. I can hardly wait to see it. I'm sure it's extremely amusing. It's going to be full of sound and fury, the Wolfpack statement. Sound and fury signifying nothing. Anyway, we will see you later. Between now and then, of course, if you want to join us over at Aurora Republic, our mascot and team leader and all-around swell person, Lisa, will be handling the introduction to the organization. She'll take real good care of you. And if you like to drive a truck, there's a role for you there too out there. So that'll do it. Thanks very much for joining us. No outro music. Baby, I'm heading home. And we will see you, I hope and imagine, next Thursday on this here Stratosphere Lounge show. Looking forward very much to opening up the new site next week so you can tell us what you think. And presumably the language will be a little different than what you told us about, I think, last time. So here we go. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.